So excited that you're joining me today for a Facebook Live, a very special Facebook Live. I have a special guest. I am Julia Campbell, and I help nonprofits build their movements and engage their communities through social media. And today we have Noah Barnett from CauseVox with us, and we are going to debate, discuss, and just detail every aspect of Facebook's fundraising tools, the pros, the cons, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I'm really happy to introduce you to Noah, and I'm going to pull him up.
Hey, Julia.
How
Hey,
are
how's
you?
it going? Good.
Let's see. There you go. How are you doing?
I'm great. I forgot to bring my boxing gloves. I heard we were going to be debating.
I know. And actually, I used to love boxing. I actually really used to like boxing, but fortunately, I haven't boxed in a really long time. All right, so what I wanted to talk about today was the recent discussion, just the sort of heated rhetoric around Facebook's fundraising tools. Because when you and I did that webinar a couple of weeks ago, we discovered that there were still a lot of questions, there's misconceptions, there is a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety around raising money on Facebook. And
Yeah,
I wanted to bring you on today because you're an expert in the peer-to-peer crowdfunding online fundraising space. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about CauseVox, and then we're going to sort of jump into the meat of the discussion, just so everyone can
absolutely
know a little bit about you.
And this really was sparked from a webinar you and I co-hosted on like Facebook changes and all of that. So we're excited to kind of come on and really talk about how that's going to shape up and like what does that look like. Like Julia said, I run marketing at a company called CauseVox. We're a community-driven fundraising platform, basically providing nonprofits the tools to run online fundraising campaigns, donation pages, recurring giving campaigns, and also doing peer-to-peer and team fundraising. And so these Facebook changes have been something that we've been keeping a lot of eyes on because we provide similar tools, but in a different way. And so I'm excited to kind of talk a little bit more about the pros and cons of that with Julia.
Okay, so why don't I start off by detailing something that I think is kind of one of the major pros, and maybe you're going to disagree with me about this. So we're going to talk about all of these different features. We're going to talk about setup and cost and customization, promotion and distribution, reporting requirements, metrics, follow-up, donor information. I think that one of the major pros, honestly, is the ease of setup and the accessibility of these tools to any 501c3. And now they've opened it up. It used to just be to US-based 501c3s. They've actually opened it up to a multitude of different countries, and I don't know, they're adding new countries every day. If you have the 501c3 letter and you're registered and you have a Facebook page and you have a presence, it's pretty easy to get set up and get started right away. And another pro that I find is that there are no fees when you use the donate button and when your page raises money. But I know that you had an important point to make about the fees, because I think we hear a lot about, they eliminated the fees after Giving Tuesday. Now it's totally free to run a fundraiser. But while that might be true, I think there are some caveats.
Yeah, and right? I think what's interesting. Yeah, no, definitely. And I think what's interesting is, yes, if you're a charity that's registered and all of that, it's perfect because you can just jump on, you apply, and you're set up. There is a waiting period that's like uncertain, and you're also still at the mercy of Facebook and Network for Good approving your charity. And so as we've seen in the media landscape, like depending on where things shift and what types of organizations are seen as controversial, it could be that all of a sudden they block out certain types of organizations, or whether it's in the religious space or the advocacy space with politics coming up. And that's something that is a limiting factor. I think as far as on the cost goes, though, there is this big incentive that, hey, Facebook fundraisers is free. However, it's the transparency around that is a little vague. And I know some of the nonprofits that use Facebook fundraisers for Giving Tuesday were surprised that it wasn't a completely free thing. And that's because personal fundraisers still incur a fee. So if you're using Facebook fundraisers for peer-to-peer, which I think is the true value that they're pitching, there's still kind of a vague 5 to 9% fee. And the fee is in of itself isn't the problem. I think it's just the transparency around that. And again, it was similar to the Bill and Melinda Gates matching grant. That was kind of, again, really vague, huge incentive.
And it went away in 5 minutes. It was $20 million.
It's one of those things that like they still seem very gimmicky and there's big promises. But I just don't know how that's playing out for the majority of nonprofits.
Right. And that leads me to a very important point about the peer-to-peer aspect, because with that, the ease of setup is the extreme ease on the user's part to raise money for a charity. So it could be midnight, it could be 2 a.m, and I could say, I want to donate my birthday. Or actually, there's an example that I can put in the comments. A friend of mine had a fundraiser for a family that lost everything in a fire around here, and she did it in 2 seconds. She put the donate button on her page. It was going to a local charity, a 501c3 that was raising money and funds for this family and for other families that had lost things in the fire. And it was just so instant and so it was just so instant, easy, accessible, almost impulsive. And I think that is a huge, huge advantage. But I do agree, like you said, the peer-to-peer fees are very strange and very opaque, and they're not at all transparent. I mean, I still don't actually really know what they are. Anyone would like to tell me if they've run a peer-to-peer fundraiser, because they vary. I think they vary on number of donations. But for me, the main pro and the main reason why I think that Facebook fundraising is gaining so much steam is just that ease of use. We don't even have to think about it. The second I write the word nonprofit in a status update, it prompts me and it says, do you want to add a donate button to your post?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that ease of use is something that we can't deny. You know, Facebook has been designing a powerful user experience and kind of really educating and crafting an addictive way of doing things, like how we share updates, how we create events, how we attend events. They own the notification stream, and so they can shoot out notifications, and that's all good. But it's still very much focused on the individual. And so when it comes to nonprofits thinking about how they can leverage that, it's not that they shouldn't, but should they promote it as the way that they run fundraisers? And I think that's a lot of the questions we're getting, is not that whether you should participate and whether you should offer people to donate to your organization using Facebook or whatnot. But if you're trying to run a fundraising campaign or trying to encourage supporters to promote and advocate for your cause, that's where it's unclear whether Facebook fundraisers is really the best choice. And I think it comes from this idea that the nonprofit is actually almost secondary to the experience. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm promoted to add a donate button to my my status updates or post about nonprofits, or I go to someone else's page that's donating on behalf of a nonprofit, the nonprofit's presence is almost like an afterthought. Like, it's mentioned who the organization is, it's mentioned maybe what they do, and someone's really excited about that, but it's so hidden and removed. And one of the things that you're really giving up in a Facebook fundraiser is that the campaigns aren't designed to promote your organization. They're designed to promote generosity, which is great. And Facebook's really trying to do better at that. But it's not there to build brand loyalty and trust between a supporter and your organization, because your organization's ability to kind of promote your cause or even customize the design or the experience, even showcase like, hey, if you give $100, this is the impact of that, is almost non-existent. And so really it's kind of similar to social media, where like there's tons of people out there sharing about your organization online, but you don't really have control or like authority to kind of, it's not an owned experience. And I know that's something you and I have talked about a lot.
Yes. So I have found that is by far that's probably one of two major cons. And I know we're going to get into, the information that is provided to the nonprofit, but it's like you said, Facebook does not, and I completely agree with this, does not have the nonprofit's interest at heart at all.
Oh, absolutely not.
It has its users' interests at heart. But I think that's important for nonprofits to know, and for any business or brand that is building a presence in a community on Facebook, they do not have your back at all. I mean, it's somewhere you have to be, and it's something you have to, or you have to at least explore it. It might not be right for you and for your goals. You have to explore it. It's a powerhouse. It's 2 billion people, but there has to be that strategy. You can't build your whole house on it.
Yeah,
so it just
absolutely.
needs to be that tool in the tool belt. I always hear about this, especially, because we're going to talk about supporter experience. There's no customer service. And I know that a lot of any of my clients are watching, or a lot of people that are in my Facebook group, the number one question is, I can't get in touch with someone at Facebook. I'm having a problem. I can't, get an answer to this question. So that's a huge thing that you have to think about. Like if customer support or speaking to someone on the phone or customization, branding, if that's all, part of your organizational mission and your goals for your fundraising campaign, then you do have to look critically at Facebook. But I would even push back and say, people are going to be fundraising for you, whether you like it or not. Hopefully, maybe one or two people at some point are probably going to start a fundraiser for you, or at least put that donate button on a post for you. So it's definitely, I think, something that you need to keep in mind and educate yourself on, and your staff. Like, what happens if this happens? Is this something we're actively trying to promote to our donors and to our followers? Or is this something that we'll sort of cross that bridge when we come to it? But I think being proactive more than reactive is always worthwhile. The other thing I wanted to say, and I wish I will share some of the screenshots in the comments, is just the push that Facebook is doing around fundraisers. So not even on the personal posts. I see in my newsfeed, in my notifications, when an organization starts a fundraiser and when a friend of mine starts a fundraiser for an organization. Facebook loves when you stay in their ecosystem and you don't leave. They don't like outside links. So if you are running a fundraising campaign, that's something you need to think about. If you want to gain more reach on Facebook, then holding a piece of that fundraising campaign within Facebook is going to get you more reach and more exposure. So that's something to talk about too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like you hit on a few important things, but I think it kind of goes back to the interesting idea. And some of the questions we've received here at CosBox is, should we just run campaigns on Facebook? And the thing that we say is you should definitely leverage that as a channel of distribution for your fundraising efforts. There's people on Facebook. If you have a community on Facebook, it's a great opportunity to offer that. But it comes back to this idea of whether it's active or passive fundraising. And the idea that, like you mentioned, people are going to fundraise and Facebook's really pushing this. So if it's not your charity, it's someone else's charity. And so you should be there. It's similar to like the Amazon Smile campaign, where like Amazon convinced so many nonprofits to put header images on their website to go to Amazon and sign up for Amazon Smile.
I know.
And to me, like Amazon Smile was a great way to gain passive income and a great opportunity you should promote to your supporters that are loyal and trustworthy. But the fact that nonprofits were promoting people to go from their website, which is an owned experience where they can showcase their brand, showcase the change that they're fighting for in the world, and go to Amazon, which is a distraction-filled, very noisy environment with the hopes that they would then come back to your website. Like it takes so much effort to do that. And so I think when I look at Facebook fundraisers, it's in the same way, is that if you have a community of supporters that are supporting your organization, do you really want to be promoting them to go into Facebook to set up a fundraiser? It's like sending someone in the mall and saying, hey, can you buy like a cinnamon sugar donut at this one stand over here? And then asking them to come back to you like afterwards. Like there's so many distractions and there's so many other people vying for attention. And so if you already own the attention and you have the ability to connect with the supporter, which is extremely hard in today's day and age, I would just highly push back on sending them into a noisy filled environment like Facebook. And so there's a passive and active element to this that I think is really important for nonprofits to consider. And seeing Facebook fundraisers as more of a distribution channel or a channel that then leads to funds that goes back to a larger campaign strategy that's owned, like your website or a fundraising campaign that's branded and owned by you. It's just going to be more powerful long term, and you're going to be able to own that. And I think it's important. So there's promotion and distribution opportunities on Facebook, but I think seeing it more as a channel rather than a destination is going to be really important for nonprofits to keep in mind.
Right. So we talked about promotion and distribution, which is, in my mind and my experience, the main pro, right?
Sure.
Facebook loves Facebook. It's 2 billion people. You'll probably have a page there. You might have some fans there. People are getting more and more familiar with donating. It's not, I saw a bunch of fundraisers on Giving Tuesday. I think it's picking up steam.
Absolutely.
But let's talk about a really big con that I don't even think I can have a pro for, because it is a big
Hey, you're supposed to be on the pro side of the argument.
I know, but the pro to me is just, it's Facebook. But the con to me, and I know you want to talk about this, is the management and tracking. It's really not good. So there is the pro in terms of management and tracking is if you are verified with Facebook payments and you have the 501c3 and you set it up and you're all registered with Facebook, you do get those daily transaction reports. You get every 48 hours, almost real time. You can track donations and track a campaign. But we all know this, if you've ever raised money on Facebook, the con is that you may only get the first name, last name, and email. So you want to talk more about that? Because I know that's a big reason.
I think, and I'll talk about that from like a experience one of our customers had. And so one of our customers here at CosVox uses CosVox to create their fundraising campaigns, run annual campaigns. And they were excited about the offer that Facebook was dropping the fees and the Bill and Melinda Gates matching grant. And so on Giving Tuesday, they got really excited and said, hey, we're going to try Facebook fundraisers. And so we're going to run our entire Giving Tuesday campaign on Facebook. And the thing about that is that they still raised money, but after the fact, they were shocked to realize that they didn't receive matching funds and that they received funds eventually from Network for Good, but there was a delay. And they just felt like they couldn't get the donor information, which to them, being a small, medium-sized nonprofit, the funds are important. So the money is important. And that's like every nonprofit says they need more money. However, what nonprofits really want is more relationships with donors that they can cultivate and build upon. And I think that's the most limiting factor, is because, like we talked about earlier, like your nonprofit's just like a sub point on the donation process. So if I donate to the nonprofit on Facebook, it's just like, hey, you're contributing to this. It's great. Like I may not know much about them. I don't have much loyalty to them. And then on top of that, the nonprofit doesn't really have a good chance of being able to say, great, you donated, which means you're at least interested in the work we did, or you were inspired to give in some capacity. Now I want to follow up and cultivate that relationship with that supporter. I spent 6.5 years running growth for a nonprofit, and our biggest focus was less on money and more on donors, because we knew that the more donors we could cultivate deeper relationships with, the more money we would raise over time. And so it's a more of a long-term game. And I feel like Facebook fundraising is very much a short-term game.
Yes. So that's a very important point. And I want to say to anybody watching, when we reach the 20-minute mark, we are going to be taking your questions. So feel free to type them into the comments. And we'll take questions pretty much on anything involving Facebook, involving peer-to-peer fundraising. Take advantage of Noah while you have him here. And take advantage of his knowledge. So I was writing down while you were talking, and I was thinking to myself, it completely goes back to the very not sexy thing about planning. You have to know your goals, your organizational goals. So is your goal for this fundraising campaign to raise $5,000 as quickly as possible for Giving Tuesday, or to fill a gap, or to just see if you can do it, or to get more people that don't know you to know you? Or is your goal to build that donor file and build relationships that you can retain in the long term? I think you should maybe look at both goals. I don't think that they are mutually exclusive, but I think it's really important to understand that, you know, your donors on Facebook, they might be friends of mine. They might give because they like me. I'm doing a fundraiser for my birthday, or I'm doing a fundraiser for a cause that I care about, and they give because they like me. They don't necessarily give because they like your organization.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, how are you going to cultivate them? I do think you get emails, but I've heard mixed reports from organizations I work with. Sometimes they get them, sometimes they don't.
I think it's based on security permissions, and even
so,
to like, because the security is such a big deal on Facebook, that they have to maintain trust with their users.
Absolutely.
And so what they don't want to do is get into any issue that they feel like, or users feel like somehow their information is getting passed to somebody else. That's a huge issue that Facebook is always dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, so far, like you said, they give first name, last name, and they give email if it's like opt into, from my understanding.
Right, check a box.
And then outside
I always
of that,
check the box, but it's very
little. Yeah, like you can go try to track down donors, because you can go look at fundraisers pages. And again, I think this goes back to like we were talking about management and tracking.
Yes.
It's really hard to know because we're talking to nonprofit fundraisers here and leaders, like to know what is going on like with the fundraisers out there. You don't really have control over like who can fundraise for you or how they're going about fundraising. And that's kind of the world we live in on social media. But I think the interesting thing is like, again, it's very much of like a rented influence style fundraising campaign, which can be a great piece of a larger campaign, similar to how I would encourage donors or nonprofits to send out emails and even consider direct mail or offline solicitation in addition to their online. But it all leads back. It should lead back, in my opinion, and just from my personal experience, to an owned asset.
Yes.
And that's one thing like we are really primed on here at CauseVox is like, we're very different than other fundraising platforms where like you're not hosting your campaigns on CauseVox, but rather CauseVox is similar to like an email marketing tool where we're empowering you to create owned, branded, customized campaigns, embed those on your website, brand them. And it's an owned experience where CauseVox is almost invisible, similar to how like when you send emails from MailChimp or Constant Contact, your supporters don't know that MailChimp or Constant Contact or you're sending your emails. It's a tool to empower you to be more successful. And that's what I've just seen work better than kind of saying, oh, Facebook's opening up, we should run our campaigns on this. It's a piece of the puzzle, but I would be cautious moving all your eggs into the Facebook basket, as many saw with 10 years ago or 5 years ago when people were like, oh, should I give up my website because my Facebook page is the best, or I'm buying likes and doing all that. And then Facebook changes the rules and all those people are now, you know,
organic reach
something I
down.
Can't say, you know, Facebook Live. So
I know. Facebook, we love you, but we also hate you sometimes. They definitely keep us on our toes. It's important. It's another important point that if you do build your house on rented land like Facebook, like you said, they could pull the rug out from under you, but there's so many changes. I mean, just this year, just in the last 3 months, we're not even 3 months done of the year yet. They've already announced 3 huge changes to the algorithm and promoting local events and, you know, taking away not trustworthy news sites and, you know, demoting public page posts. So it's really hard to keep up with all of it. So I think that's another major point that people need to understand is if they feel like they can keep up with it and they think it's exciting and new, then go for it. But if it's a little bit overwhelming, then maybe stick to, you know, kind of a branded site. The fact that it is always changing. But because we're at 12:23 now, so make sure
some of the comments are really good.
Type in your questions. But how I wanted to sort of end my piece of it is that I always encourage my clients to look at the whole puzzle, like you were saying. So I think that's the common ground that we're reaching is Facebook is a powerful tool, but it's a spoke in a wheel. It's not the hub. It's not where you should be focusing most of your time. I completely agree that your branded assets, your website, your email list, if you're doing a campaign on CauseVox, like your branded assets that you control and you customize the back end, you can customize those welcome emails, you can customize the acknowledgement emails, those are really where you should focus your time and your efforts. But Facebook is such a powerhouse, and just from what I've seen, it's something that can't be ignored. So looking at it sort of as a piece to enhance your online fundraising efforts, but having a strategy, how are you going to bring those people into the fold of your email list or an event or something that you have more control over? That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those are all great points. Like, you can never discount Facebook. Facebook has always been an important part of the fundraisers toolkit. But again, it's something that I feel like some of the dialogue that I've heard from individuals is that, like, oh, we should do our fundraising campaigns on Facebook now. Mm-hmm. It just reminds me of those days when it was like, hey, we're just going to like post everything on Facebook and we're going to do that. And it feels more like a trap rather than a good idea, because of some of the things you shared. Not that you shouldn't do it, but that you should do it inside the context of what it is, rather than reconsidering how you should run Facebook fundraising campaigns, or again, going back to that active promotion versus passive fundraising. And so I think having active fundraising and passive fundraising is really important to kind of build out a cohesive fundraising strategy. The last thing I would really kind of comment on is really going back to this idea of building relationships with donors, in that I think it's so easy to quickly see that, okay, I can get money in if I do this thing. And those promises usually end up either being less than what you thought, or they're not really focused on that long-term game. And I think we see over 50,000 nonprofits every year fail. And it's because
50,000.
It's 50,000. Like, we have the stats, and 50,000 nonprofits, and there's so many more nonprofits coming onto the scene every year. And so the competition is so fierce.
It is fierce.
That one of the things I would say, and Kiwi Lorraine Miller at Nonprofit Marketing Guide talks about this a lot, is that if you're not doing some of the core fundraising things well, like building an email list, building a mailing list, building sustainable donors, focusing on donor retention, going after some of these new shiny objects, which I think Facebook fundraisers is a shiny object, is not going to end up being the best use of your limited time and your limited budget and the limited attention you have with your supporters. And so making sure you have these core things in place first is really, really important. Like, one of the things I think is interesting is that the Fundraising Effectiveness Project released a study that said, why don't donors give again to a nonprofit? And 20 to 40%, depending on how you categorize the responses, said that it was because they didn't feel like the charity needed them, or they didn't feel the impact of their gift.
I know. So, I hear that all the time. Donor retention is really bad. Donor retention, the Black Box study.
And I think like it's so important to build strong long-term relationships with your supporters. And that's one of the biggest downsides to Facebook fundraisers, in my opinion, is you don't have the ability to do that well yet. But like we've said, Facebook changes things all the time.
Right. They could open it up. Who knows? They could change their reporting.
Yeah.
They could change. They could change everything. I saw just today that a page was able to set up a fundraiser. It was the Malala Fund. So I think that they're experimenting maybe with the bigger nonprofits being able to set up a fundraiser, like a crowdfunding page, but I don't know. And this is the thing, is you just don't know. So it's important to stay on top of things. And I'm glad that everyone here is watching this, because as you can see, I mean, we've got to stay on top of it too.
Yeah.
So we do have a couple of comments and questions. And actually there's one that I don't know the answer to. Hold on. Wait, where's the IRS compliant? Oh, Barbara says, what type of thank you is sent, and is it IRS compliant? And now, Barbara, I have donated on Facebook several times, so I have the receipts, and I am happy to share a screenshot of what the receipt says. I just can't remember it. I just print it out and put it in my, tax file. I'm assuming that it's IRS compliant because they only would send out that kind of receipt if the nonprofit was registered with Facebook Payments, and you have to be a 501c3 to do that. So I don't know, Noah, if you have any more insight on that. It's a very bland thank you for your donation. Here's how much you donated.
Exactly.
It doesn't even link to the charity's page. And you can't, at this point, you can't customize that email. But I do believe that all donation, I got this question yesterday too. All donations are completely tax deductible.
Yeah, and I think the important thing is that you're like anyone who donates through Facebook fundraisers today is donating directly to Network for Good. And so Network for Good is set up as a charitable organization that's compliant. And so the nonprofit that the individuals are actually donating to is not your nonprofit. Network for Good is a processing kind of holding company that then disperses things out, similar to like donor advised funds and like other conglomerates that kind of process that. And a lot of nonprofits even still process all their donations through Network for Good, which I would highly encourage you consider alternatives if you do that. Because again, the donors donating to them and the Network for Good sending you along whatever they've agreed on sending. And so they are charitable, they are compliant. However, it's not donating to your organization. You're getting a check from Network for Good in a lump sum, not directly from the donor.
Right. I'm going to check my receipt because I know it says the name of the charity and it says the name of maybe my friend, but I'll put it in the comments so you can see. I mean,
yeah, that'd be great.
No problem. It doesn't have any information that is interesting.
That goes again back to like the transparency side is that like you should know what they look like. You should know what's being sent to your potential donors.
That's actually a really good point. I'm happy to share it with you.
Yeah, you just don't. And so again, it's back to the transparency
side. That'd be a really good study if you know that people are raising money for you or you know that they've donated to you via Facebook. It also is if they're in your donor file or if you have a contact information for them, reaching out to them, in real life via the phone. If you can get a phone number or if anyone, if they're connected to your organization, if they're a volunteer, and finding out their experience and thanking them, but also seeing what the follow-up is probably great. It's really good to do. Abraham says, I'm not sure if this is a question or just a comment, but he says, just getting into the development world and my organization has wanted some Facebook power. I've been trying to use it to keep in contact with donors, but so many people seem to want to drive it to grab major donations. I've been on the line to determine how to find a really good balance. I always say that Facebook is it's really not best used for fundraising. Even though we're talking about Facebook fundraisers, it's best used to showcase that impact and tell your stories and explain what you're doing and build affinity and trust. That's how I see nonprofits that are really doing well on Facebook. That's what I see them doing. They're not asking for anything other than trust and affinity and people to, learn more about their great work that they're doing. Yeah. So if you have never done any fundraising before and all of a sudden you're going to start asking for money on Facebook, it might not succeed as well. Oh my goodness, these are great. Now they're all coming in. Oh, Anna says, please share a case study or example of passive fundraising using Facebook. So does that mean, I don't know what that means. Does that mean someone's just setting up a fundraiser for you? Is that sort of what it means, I think? A passive
so what I'm saying is that if you are a charity, you should register with Facebook to be available to utilize those tools. So for example, even today, I was sharing something about a nonprofit that we're collaborating with here at Cosbox. Right. And Facebook offered me to set up a donation page for that nonprofit. And so that nonprofit hasn't done anything except for register for that. And so again, the passive income that they could potentially get from someone like myself or my friends that might donate to that because I'm promoting it is helpful. And so even when people are retweeting or resharing or reposting your nonprofit's like updates, stories, etc., them going ahead and adding a donate button to yours is a passive way of fundraising because you as the nonprofit aren't saying, hey, go create a Facebook fundraiser for us. Hey, we're fundraising on Facebook. Go create this. Right. So you're not utilizing your owned attention with your supporters to then direct them into Facebook. If there's organic value that comes from that, there's no real lost cause in doing that. And again, it's very similar to you want to be on these platforms because people then share and connect and they could drive passive income or relations for your nonprofit. Always important.
Yes. Sandra says, it'd be great if you can speak more to achieving a balance between using Facebook fundraisers and your organization's own personal fundraising platform, especially how to gently encourage donor volunteers one way or another. So I think that Noah did touch on that a lot earlier, and I think that's important. That's the key, is the balance. So for your organization, you need to figure out which one are you encouraging. And I always recommend just having all the tools available, educating your donors and supporters about the tools.
Mm.
But if you have that ability to create an outside, campaign hub, then I think sending people there and then just having it available on Facebook if you want to drive donations from Facebook, but always refer them to your branded asset. I mean, I think Noah and I are on the same.
Yeah, and I'll share a graphic out that talks about this idea
Okay.
of owned, paid, earned, and social, and
Yes,
how when you build a comprehensive strategy, you have to think about all of them. So even like earned media, like press mentions and all of that, you can't control all of that. You can't control like how people share about your charity on Facebook or with their friends and family at the water cooler. Social media has just given us like a lens into what's being talked about with our nonprofit, but you can't control all of that. But I think when it comes to you actually encouraging people to do things, like if you're building a donor engagement program or a donor advocacy program, and you're trying out, what we here at Cosvox call community-driven fundraising, how is your community of supporters really being activated to inspire others to support your organization? Having an owned environment that you're sending and encouraging people to be a part of is really important. And then just 2 examples of that I'll share in the comments is that one organization did a campaign during Giving Tuesday last year. They used Cosvox to create their own branded campaign site that had peer-to-peer fundraising, showcased real-time progress towards a goal that they were striving for, showcased the impact of what happens when you donate to the organization. Yet, when people fundraised on Facebook, they still added those donations manually into the platform. So the hub was this owned asset, but they did have people donating on Facebook, just like they had people sending them checks or calling in donations. And so again, it's just a channel that then leads back to a hub. Another example is an organization called the World Bicycle Relief. When people donate to their organization originally, they then encourage supporters to set up fundraising campaigns. So they've got the donor's attention, the donor's excited about the work they're doing. Then they invite them through their donor advocacy program to create a fundraising campaign on their behalf. And again, they're using an owned platform that they've created that's branded. It has a seamless giving experience and still allows donors to create their own pages and then share those out on Facebook or through email, word of mouth, et cetera. And so it's that striking that balance. And I would highly recommend that if you're doing active promotion of donor advocacy, I would not be pushing people to Facebook fundraisers.
Okay. I'd say once again, goes back to your goals, what you're trying to achieve, your audience, your campaign. I just think it's very organization specific and goal specific and mission specific.
Indeed,
so 2 more before we wrap up, and these 2 are pretty standard. Does Network for Good include any donor contact information? And so we talked about how it does include the name and last name, but that's their Facebook name, which, I mean, my Facebook name is not my real name. It's Julia Gulia on Facebook. And I'm Julia Campbell. So you would, if I donate to you, you would see Julia Gulia. That's the name that you would see. Yep. And I do share my email when I make a donation, just because I love nonprofits and I want them to get my information, but not everyone does. So if the person decides not to, then they don't have to. Nadine says, do you know whether registering is available in Canada? Yes, it is. If you go to donations.fb, FB as in Facebook.com, it will give you the entire list of countries. You'll take an eligibility quiz and you can immediately sign up or, figure out if you want to sign up. So donations.fb.com. I think we'll just leave it there unless you have any last words, Noah, and tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for hosting this conversation. I always enjoy it. Again, I just think it goes back to goals. It goes back to planning. And I think it's looking at this more holistically rather than this or that. And so as your organization thinks about your 2018 fundraising campaigns, thinking about how Facebook fundraisers may be a piece of that, but not a standalone strategy. Like I said, I run marketing here at Cosvox, where you can find us at cosvox.com, or I'll share the link in the comments. And if you want to reach out to me directly or you have further questions, you can email me at noah@cosvox.com. I read and respond to all my emails as much as possible. I'd be happy to have a further dialogue with you about Facebook fundraising and alternatives. So
yeah, so look for the comments, and we'll be putting screenshots, examples, our contact information in the comments. Thank you so much. Thank you, Noah. I really appreciate you
it's always fun,
joining
Julia.
us
Thanks.
today on my Facebook page. If anyone wants to follow up, I'm Julia, JC Social Marketing. I'm live every Friday, barring a snowstorm or a blizzard or a power outage. I attempt to go live every Friday at noon Eastern on my Facebook page. So thank you so much. Have a fantastic weekend, and we will talk to you soon. Cheers.
Okay.